Hi, in today's video you're gonna learn the most important rule of calculation in chess, and this will help you get the right attitude to really calculate complex and deep stuff till the end. So this position is taken from a variation from a game I played recently, and it came down to evaluate the stuff after the game, and I did this a bit without an engine, and I found it quite interesting and I found it really instructive, so I wanted to share this with you. So it's white to move. Black has just grabbed a pawn on g2 and also threatening on f3 to win a piece, but at the same time he neglected the counterplay on c6. And the question is basically, what's the evaluation of the stuff? Because if black goes into that, he needs to judge it beforehand, if he's surviving that or not. And yeah, that's the task. So it's white to move, and you can take your time, as much time as you like, to really evaluate this position, have a clear opinion about it. Is it winning for white? Is it winning for black? Or is it just equal? And along the way, I will point out the key calculation principles at the certain moments. So the first moment, I think, should be quite easy. What we need to play here, we need to be active, we need some counterplay, because you can really eliminate variations like just protecting the knight, because black will just trade and even get a fork. Okay, black will not get a fork there because knight is pinned, but after something like this, black will just trade and is a pawn up. He can never be worse. It's just clearly worse for white because he's a pawn down. So white needs to go active, bishop c6. At this point, black must make a decision, and in such scenario where the game is very sharp, you really should give a chance to every option available. So black has 4 options, and we shouldn't rush and say the capture is without an alternative, because sometimes it makes some sense to think about it, at least not to let a white queen in. But once you have a look at those moves, you quickly realize that every king move is answered by bishop d5, saving the bishop and saving the knight, leaving white with an extra piece and clearly winning the game. So black needs to take. White also needs to take. I think that's pretty obvious. Otherwise, black is just still a pawn up, no counterplay to fear. So at this point, again, there's several options, 4 of them. But again, we can quickly eliminate a lot of them. For example, bishop d7 makes no sense. We take the rook, and black has given up his own threat. So king to f8 and king to d8 we can also quickly eliminate, as we take a rook with check, then pick up this pawn here in the middle of the board while guarding the knight, and white is a rook up. So the only move is king e7. And now we again need to check for options. So white could take a pawn here, white could give a check here, or white could give a check here. At this point, I want to focus on one move only, because otherwise it would be too much for this one video. And the move I'm talking about is queen to c7. This is basically aiming for a better version of queen d5, with the c7 pawn already gone. And yeah, that's basically it about it. So after queen c7, the key question is basically, should black play king to e8 or king e6? And what to do in either case if there is another check on c6, which will certainly happen, because in both cases white should try to aim to pick up the d5 pawn with the queen to guard the f3 knight. And this is best done by picking up an extra pawn on the way. So the question is, how is this position? And the question is, how is this position? And does it make a difference at all? Like, isn't king e7 forced? Because king f5 looks way too crazy, right? And that's a big misassumption. And that's the rule I want to talk about today, which is the basic rule of calculation is just, if it works, it works. And king f5 in this position, it's a move which many people would just discard, because it looks crazy to run with the king to the 5th rank, when the king might even need to go to the 4th rank. It's very dangerous in general. But the key calculation rule says, if it works, it works. It doesn't matter if the king is in danger on the 4th rank in general. If the king is a good supporter here, just go for it. Of course, you need to calculate it, but you should not make those premature assumptions about moves. And that's really, really crucial, because you cannot decide this by feeling, by intuition, by anything. You just need to check if it works, it works. And with this approach, we're going to have a look at those 2 moves here. And we will skip the other one, because it's basically the same, because in this position he cannot go king d8 because we take and take. And if king e7, it's the same position as if we gave a check with a king on e6 and he then goes to e7. So that comes down to the same question. So we will just check it with this move order. So after queen e6 check, this actually loses because white has another check. First disrupts the harmony of the rooks and then takes the pawn. And now white has stabilized, won another pawn, and after rook d8, white has another check. And if bishop d7, we can finally stabilize. And if something else, then we will force the actions and reach some very, very favorable rook ending with 2 pawns up, which should be winning. So by having a look at this king e7, we already know, okay, this is kind of bad for black. And if we were black, we have one more reason to really investigate a move which looks wrong, but might work. And we're going to do that now. Of course, we need to figure that out, but yeah, we can quickly dive into the variations. And after, for example, queen d7, might look very crazy and yeah, maybe even unbelievable. This king is just a good attacker here, and there is no single check against the king. And black is just winning a piece, and the king will be pretty safe. Maybe it can later hide on f4 in case white puts some rooks to the e-file to attack the king. Of course, you need to figure that one out, but I think there are ways to do that. And in fact, we do that because white is not even in time to play something like rook to e1 because the queen is dropping. And if the queen needs to move, then it's pretty simple. We will take here with a check. And there is really no discussion because we are the side with the initiative with the checks, and white won't even have time for a counter attack here. So this king e4 is very funny, but it works. And if it works, it works. So let's have a look what else white could try. Queen takes d5. This is actually fine. Rook a d8. And now, for example, if queen takes f7, there is again this king to e4. And black is even winning as white, yeah, might have another check. But black is just in time to stop it. And there are no concrete issues. Black is having control, is having concrete threats, and they work. So yeah, white has no chance here. Another funny line is if they start with queen to b7, just removing the queen, getting ready to kick the white queen, hoping for some trades on f3. There is again a very nice move. Black attacks with the king. This is again very concrete, but the key principle stays the same. You just need to figure out if it works. And if you attack this piece on f3 3 times and white can just defend it twice, it works. So there are no real tries, I think, like queen f7, king to e4. White is running out of checks soon, and we are done here. Honestly, I must say I have not checked this move rook to e1, which might be an option at this point. We might have a look and figure this out together. It's maybe a bit dangerous because after any capture on f3, white will have a counter check. And we need to figure out if this works. But there should be a solution, and we will find how it works when we take some time. So first try I would do is like calculate queen takes f3. Then the king needs to go to d2. Then we are in check. We cannot take d4 because queen b4 is mate. So we need to go to the f-file. But after that, I don't really see the counterplay because I see white running out of checks quickly. So queen f3, here. So now there is basically not so many checks while we are threatening some checks on our own. So he needs to be fast. But after this already, checks are running out. And also everything in our position is protected. And I think we are just winning. Counter attack is incoming. And I think that's enough. Maybe I would calculate this forcing move, but as far as I can see, queen f2 forces rook to e2 when after this white is just collapsing here. So hope I could give you some insight into the most important principle of calculation. If it works, it works with this very provocative and of course very extreme case where you run with the king over the whole board. But yeah, like this, I hope that it's very memorable and that you can apply the technique in your own games and improve your game with mastering calculation a little bit better. So we quickly come back to the first question of this video, like how is the evaluation of the position? It's just equal in fact, because black, yeah, can pose some problems here, but white also has some antidotes. For example, here white could play rook h to g1, forcing some major trades and reaching a more or less equal ending after rook d5. Rook g2, rook takes d4. Black is still a pawn down, but he's having enough counterplay, maybe even in the driver's seat, because this f3 knight is pinned, but objectively it's drawn. But yeah, it's very hard to see this from the beginning. I think the important thing is to see that black is not losing because he has this resource of going here, which might look very surprising at first sight. But yeah, objectively equal, but there are many ways to go wrong. And after black spotted king f5, there are even quite some ways for white to go wrong. And I think it's white who needs to prove that he can keep the balance here. For example, we saw some lines which have just been losing for white, like this queen d7 approach, or even this and rook d8, queen to f7 approach. They're all losing, so it's always some side who needs to take care. But for the sake of completeness, I wanted to mention it's equal if everybody's playing perfect here. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy my videos, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate that. And let me know in the comments below if you have experienced similar situations where you really beat your opponent by calculating stuff out which looked unbelievable. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye.